Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new people, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something on the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. And if you're enjoying the conversation here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you or someone you know like to come on the show and have a chat with me, you can find me on social media of your choice. And if you go to isaacar11.com, you can see all the different places that I'm at, and you can go ahead and reach out to me. With that out of the way, let's get started with my guest. We're actually talking about hockey before we got started. So maybe we'll talk about hockey. Maybe we'll talk about something else. Who knows? I think we're going to have a great time. My guest today is Pavlo Baron. Pavlo, do you want to say hello, introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I just learned that it's live, so I'm pretty nervous here. Pablo Baron. I live in Munich, Germany. I'm a veteran looking at a very long career in, generally computers. Started by soldering my first computer, hacking assembly for different reasons. Move on to all kinds of things throughout my career. Was a startup co-founder. We exited to IBM 2020. Did a lot of things, and now I'm founder or co-founder of another company that is doing some cool stuff together with the other guys.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to kind of chatting about what you've been doing over the bit. But I like to get started with how you got started. Like, when did you realize that technology was a thing for you? Did you have like a seminal moment growing up, or let's hear your story. Let's hear your origin story.
Oh my God, I really need to look back, way back. So I was into sports and I was into music.
Okay.
Actually, technology was number three. Um, well, in my youth, like around 14, I played a lot of video games, and those actually fascinated me. While most of the time I actually spent playing my bass guitar and regular guitars, preparing myself for a career of a musician because my father is a musician. And in parallel, I did boxing, heavyweight. So technology was kind of uh, in the background until I realized that I actually can play myself around those video games, and it wasn't really boring when you kind of see the patterns and can really achieve results real quick. So I started hacking my own ones. I was not succeeding for a long time. I'm actually not really. I mean, yes, I am creative, but I'm not really. Well, yeah, not really a game designer whatsoever.
Sure.
But I like the component of programming. It's, to some extent, when I grew up using my computer, that was so rudimentary, so simple back then. You felt like an artist. Actually, arts is really what I like. And then you felt like you can suddenly do real cool stuff. So I never planned a career of an engineer, but at some point, my father told me that you need to be really, really good and really, really lucky to be a professional, successful musician. Otherwise, it's arts without any bread.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and my parents suggested that I go study computer science, and that's what I ended up doing.
Well, I mean, sounds like they made the right choice. You mentioned something about creativity, right? I've said this a million times that I think that there's a very tight coupling between creative minds and people that end up writing software or being in tech. I've met so many people in my career, like you just talked about how you played bass guitar and guitar. Like, for the people that are watching this, like, I have guitars behind me, like I play music. And I've known people that they draw, they sculpt, they do all sorts of great creative things, like more fine art sort of things. And I guess my question for you, that do you think that there is like a direct link between like the ability to think and problem solve in an elegant way and like what would people say would be traditionally a creative thought process?
Well, I've seen all kinds of people throughout my career. I mean, you can be creative and still stay exclusively in the engineering space.
Mm.
I mean, I was fascinated with people who were basically soldering drones and everything in the free time while being real good hackers. This also impresses me, although they actually never could sing a single song or play
Sure,
anything
sure.
other guitar.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So that's not the point. But the thing that at least people of my generation and the ones I've met going a lot to conferences and talking to all kinds of folks, There is definitely a side of our profession that is attracting very creative heads,
Yes.
and it is kind of in the neighborhood. I mean, it depends on the kind of music that you like and the kind of arts that you generally do. But if you kind of abstract this and think about at least the rhythmical as a mathematical problem, then it is very close to solving a computing problem as well.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other side, there's so much in the music, you know it, that you can actually cheat your way around without any concept.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, you're gonna need special brain for that, I think.
Yeah, I think at some point in time, as a musician learns how to play an instrument, there is this subtle, probably hint of like, oh, this is just math.
Yeah.
Like, like musical theory is all based on math and steps and different things, right? Yes, there's some elegance to it, and how the physics of an instrument work. Like that's very important too. But at the end of the day, like I could say, hey Pablo,
Mhm.
can you play? You're a bass player. Hey, can you play something in A? And you can play something in A because you know all the notes and you know like the kind of the sequencing of how the notes go to sound good, and like there is a repeatable pattern that people can kind of fall into. And I think there's very similar fields with software, right? Like we have these very primitive concepts like conditionals, like loops, like recursion, all these things, right, that exist, um, that have just kind of like built the foundation of how we think about solving problems. And so my question to you is like, you know, when we think about solving problems, like, do you remember a time like where you had to solve a problem and like you stepped away afterwards and you're like, this is art. Like this is the most elegant like algorithm or the most elegant thing that I've ever thought about. And like, this is art, right? Hang my code on the wall. Do you ever have that feeling? You ever remember something like that?
Oh yeah. Um, a lot of it actually. I made my career in the very beginning with the other guy who was more on the physical side of things, and we had these printers that didn't have any kind of manual with them, and our job was to make them work with MS DOS.
Sure.
And I mean, navigating this whole kind of system, trying to find commonalities in all these signals and everything, and trying, I mean, a lot of trial and error. That's not like an epiphany that you say, okay, overnight there is a problem and there's a solution to it in your head. But what I like the most, I'm a very iterative guy. I mean, I
Sure.
like iterating. I love iterating. I like something to be working right away, and then I take the time to polish it.
Mm,
Uh, so, if you ask me, those are the most enjoyable things in my early days and throughout the career. But I also had this epiphanies. I mean, I really had to solve a very hard logistic problem with software back then, and I remember I just in my head I had to turn around the table 90-degree, and then that was a solution. Effectively, I was so proud of this. This was very early, and that was much higher level than I did in assembly back then.
sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that
Mm.
everybody has like that moment where they realize like, oh, like I can do this. Like because I think initially when you start getting into computing, like, especially at least for me, like there were so many different tools and so many different things, and maybe when you got started is a little bit not simpler is not a fair word, but I'm just gonna use it anyway. Like you can kind of like, oh, I know how to do this. And you have a love for it, and I think that kind of shown through. Here's the question for you: when did you real like you said that your parents kind of guided you to a computer science or a sort of a computer sort of engineering sort of degree, right?
Oh,
um
well, I was already hacking by then. I mean,
sure,
that's
yeah,
that was just the guidance.
yeah. I guess my follow-up to that is like, when did you realize that there's a career in it? Like hacking is one thing, but like a career and like being able to buy a house or if or pay your
Oh, wow.
mortgage or whatever, like when did you realize there's money to be made and there's an actual life that you can build with technology?
Well, my background is actually I grew up in what is the Ukraine right now,
Okay.
and like buying a house and everything was kind of not really on the
Sure,
table.
sure.
Um, uh, grew up in a modest kind of environment, but my parents actually enabled me, empowered me with everything I needed. When did I realize that there's money to be made? That's funny. I mean, that's exactly the same thing. I mean, we had this 20 printers piling up in my room. And we was like, okay, one by one, we made them work. And suddenly somebody paid us for that. I mean, neither did the other guy who was soldering stuff, nor myself. We actually did realize that there's money to be made. Well, it started as a hobby.
Yeah.
Somebody asked us, and then suddenly they started paying. And then I realized that obviously it's really, and back then it was really, really highly elitary. I mean, we're looking at something what is like that is like beginning of the 90s, right?
Yeah.
um, you felt like you are part of a very, very, very small group of people who can do real cool stuff with computers and nobody else can.
Yeah.
I mean, that feeling for a young boy who's like in his 15 or 16 years old, that is something.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that, and not to knock people that they choose technology as kind of just a job, because I think that there's definitely people that you've probably worked with and I've worked with where they're able to just kind of check in and check out, and like technology doesn't kind of drive their way of thinking. And there's people I think that are probably similar to more like you and me, where there's a natural curiosity of like how things work, and then you just recognize like over time it's like I can't imagine doing anything else. Like here's a question: Do you was there any point in time like in your like formative years where you thought like, oh, like maybe like computers isn't for me, maybe I'll go and be a chemist, or maybe I'll go and do something else? Or was it always computing for you?
Yeah, since then it was always computing. I mean, I couldn't live without programming. I mean, you can imagine I was throughout my career in all kinds of positions that actually don't expect you to hack anymore. And I would go into the development team, go on the ops side and do low level stuff just because I can.
Sure.
And I really enjoy it. I really like it because if I'm only talking and there's no result that comes out of my hands, I hate that already.
Yeah.
So at no point in time, well, sometimes you just want to jack it all in and go garden because all of the tools are broken. Everything is kind of wrong. It always feels like you're exhausted at the end of the day and there's no outcome. But I get up on the next day and I do exactly the same thing again because I really love what I'm doing. And I'm still playing music, by the way.
Yeah. 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 I mean, what so complete side note, like what is your like so you said do you play bass and guitar or just typically bass?
Well, I play drums. I play drums. I play a little bit of keyboard
Okay.
when I learned the other days. So yeah, but bass is my real passion. This is the instrument I started with.
So this is not related to tech at all, but I'm genuinely curious because I think who your favorite musicians are, I think really defines who people are, in my opinion. Like you play bass, right? So like, what is a bass? Like, what sort of bass player do you like look up to, or you recognize as like that is a great bass player? Is it like a Les Claypool style? Is it a Jaco Pastorius? Is it
Oh, it's definitely Jaco. I mean,
yeah,
Jaco is. I grew up listening weird music, and I still do. I mean, I'm all for jazz rock and progressive rock, not the metal side of it, like really stuff like Yes, Genesis. I grew up listening all that, and I'm still hanging in that age. And I have two kids, and my son is exactly like me. He's all for guitars, and he didn't leave the 70s still
sure.
with the music he's listening to. Yeah, this is yes. I mean, all of these guys who actually can play much better than I do, I look up to them.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't remember exactly what bass player it was, but I remember when I was young, and like I always thought there was like a huge difference between playing bass and guitar. And like a layman would probably say like bass is like the easier version of guitar, right? Like at least when people start in instruments that they kind of see the instruments, they look the same. There's less strings, whatever, right? And then I saw somebody play bass like a guitar, like with power chords and just really really fast movements. And I recognized like, oh, like this instrument is so much more interesting than guitar because it can do rhythm, it can do melody, but it can also just do all these weird tonal shifts that I think typically like guitar players don't really do. Like guitar players for the most part, they play a lot of similar things, right? unless you're a jazz guitarist or whatever, and you're kind of in that world. But a bass player, you can ask a bass player like, oh, I want you to play a punk song. I want you to play a metal song. I want you to play astro pop, like, and they can just kind of pull out of their little inventory of things they can do because they can kind of drive how a song sounds, right?
Yeah.
So with that, going back to technology, like what sort of roles do you think are like the bass guitarist of a technology organization's band? Like, is it your ops people who, or, is it an engineer? Like, I'm generally curious, like to use a really weird analogy, right? Like, who is the bass player in a technology organization?
Well, that is an interesting question, to be honest. I mean, depends on the size of the organization, how people are organized, what they're actually doing, and everything. But I can give you an example. Our lead engineer, I worked with him already. Great guy, great talent, but also the guy who gives the frequency when it's about shipping software. So that is probably the bass player for me. It doesn't mean that he wouldn't be able to play guitar, but his job is actually to be the rhythm section and carry everybody. So I kind of always look to for this kind of guy in any team that I join or observe from the side, or they're reporting to me, or whatever the constellation is. And I tried a lot of those. I'm always looking for this kind of person and try to empower them as much as I can, because you know that when the hell breaks loose, this is the guy you want to
Yeah.
rely on to make it work.
Yeah, I do always find it funny that like the bass player always plays other instruments. Like, a bass player will also play keyboard. Bass player will also play drums. Like people think of like Paul McCartney, right? Like Paul McCartney played every single instrument, right? But he was the bass player in the Beatles just because the Beatles needed a bass player, right? So it's just very funny, like in your analogy where it's like somebody who can kind of do a little bit of everything. I think that there's a ton of value in that. I think that the only caveat or side effect to somebody who can do a little bit of everything is that they end up getting stuck trying to solve every problem for every single situation. Right. And I think from your perspective, like, how do you, when you're building or like you're trying to solve a complex problem, at what point in time are you comfortable, like not giving up, but getting help? Like what is the particular point in time, at least for you, Pavlo, where you recognize like I need to reach into the ether and get somebody who probably knows how to do this a bit better than me?
Um, I've never had a problem to ask for help myself.
Sure.
This is how you learn, right?
Yeah.
And there's always people, even if they are younger than you, there are always people who are better than you in everything and whatever. I mean, this is how humanity works effectively. So I myself never had this problem, but I've seen a lot of people who do. And this is what needs to be fixed in this industry, I think. I don't even know if this is a cultural problem, or maybe they should be just educated in their studies by just asking and towards asking for help. Because the thing is that in a complex environment with so many tools and so much software and so many things to consider and everything, not a single guy will know everything.
Yeah.
This is impossible.
Yeah.
That's why we're building teams, right? I mean, this is why everybody has their own strengths, and they can actually kind of compensate each other's, well, I mean, inconsistencies, insufficiencies, however you call them. But that's exactly how it works. Um, uh, in the engineering space, it is interesting. This kind of um, uh, this pride. I think that's what I've seen a lot, where you don't want to ask for help because otherwise you think that you're not going to be perceived any expert anymore.
Yeah.
But I believe that what makes the true expert is that they know where to stop and don't go any further and just ask somebody who thinks or who they think knows it better or can do it better.
Yeah. I think that there's probably less than 5 like technologies in the history of software development that you could give them any problem and they could solve it by themselves. Like the only one that I can think of at the top of my head is like Linus, right? Like Linus Torvalds. Like I think,
Well,
and even
I've never seen him do any business application, so I can
yeah,
tell. I mean, I
yeah,
suspect a low-level hacker like this guy probably wants to stay in his territory, and
sure, yeah,
that's
yeah.
where he's really strong, right? But I don't know. I mean, I can tell you this is the same as that you let your car mechanic build your house. I mean, it can work or might not work, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great idea for a game show. Like you take like a low level hacker or somebody who like builds like kernels for Linux, and you ask them to like, oh, can you build like a PHP application that hits like a MySQL database? And
Yeah,
see and,
right.
and
I
see what
mean,
happens, right? Like that would be a great game to play. Oh, I have a great idea for a show.
probably will tell you for the next half hour why PHP should not be used and
Yeah,
what the
or
security risks are and
yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean, that yeah, it's very spot on. Um, obviously, and so with your career, you've been doing this a long time, and you've seen like the waves of different technology trends show up and go away. Like, do you
Mhm.
remember at least one when you recognize like immediately, like, oh, this changes everything? Like right now, we're like a lot of people think of like the internet, or people think of, the idea of, you know platform engineering, or they talk about like microservice architecture, and now we're in this wave of AI. Like, did you do a couple of points in your career when you recognize like, okay, well, I've been doing this for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, however long, and now I got to think about things a completely different way?
Well, I don't limit myself to just my lifetime because I'm naturally interested in history, and I'm trying to read as much as I can when time is available to see what was going on before us. And it's always kind of the same thing. At the end of the day, every movement like what we experience with AI right now always has enough voices that will say that that's completely changing humanity, changing whatsoever. But when you read up, there was stuff like that in the 14th century too. Um, because by then, technology or humanity was at some point in its history, and it was big enough a jump. What was introduced, whatever. I mean, come on, we're reading books, so somebody invented basically writing and printing. That's pretty much the same level. And what I'm personally considering, every time I look at a trend, how far will it bring a particular, well, part of the species? I don't know. I don't want to sound too globally galactic here, but my point is, if I limit this to just my profession, um, what is happening right now, of course, you cannot compare advances in platform engineering. Platform engineering is nothing else but an increment. When you compare it
Yeah,
with advances in AI, that is definitely a totally different league. It's different sports. But at the end of the day, what I like about developments like this, it doesn't matter how small or big, we are able to absorb them and move forward.
yeah,
I That's what I like. At some point, people are fed up with just glorifying something and move on with our own stuff, but apply the technology or whatever has been created in the meantime. And I think we're closer to that now with artificial intelligence.
yeah,
Um, Platform engineering is it's an orthogonal thing. I mean, it's a way to work. Platform engineering is an idea how you actually avoid waste in the organization
yeah.
that normally repeats the same thing hundreds of times, and there is no way around it. So effectively, you're trying to do it just once. But if you compare it, I mean, my even my cat is using ChatGPT. I think already. I need to ask.
Sure.
If you compare that's a different scale,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So it just depends.
yeah. I mean, when just to talk about platform engineering a little bit, like I've always been fascinated by like the phrase platform engineering, because I immediately think it's like, oh, like we've always built platforms. Like we've always needed to build like large systems, right? Even, I like you were talking about like getting galactic, right? Like I'm a science fiction person, right? Like,
Mm.
we were building systems that put people on the moon 50 years ago, right?
Yeah,
We were building really complex systems. There's just the tools
right.
were a bit different, right? And when I think of platform engineering, I think of like, okay, what is it in its essence, right? It's like you talked about. It's using tools to kind of shape differently how organizations operate, right? And then when I think of that, like, okay, what is another example of that? I think of like DevOps, right? Like,
Well, that's different, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's exactly the point. DevOps was an attempt. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you,
no,
but I
no,
got
no, no. I guess my question is like I've always saw platform engineering is like the next iteration of DevOps for like from an
right.
operational standpoint, right? And I'd love to kind of get your thoughts about that, right? Like
Yeah.
obviously you've made a life out of platform engineering and like figuring out how engineering teams can be effective. And is it too um is it crude to say that platform engineering is like the next iteration of DevOps, or is it to say that there are complementary pieces to each other instead?
It's not rude. I think that you're absolutely right. This is the next development that actually should be applied. If you get a chance to decide right now, do you do DevOps or you move on with platform engineering? The latter should be your choice because this is
Okay,
like a next level. What what DevOps was good at, I mean, the problem is that if you look at how developers work and how people work who operate software, and besides small teams and early teams and startups in the early stage, there's always the need to separate them because you definitely want kind of for your compliance, whatever regulations you're following, you kind of want to separate those who are building from those who are running. This is a normal thing. It always has existed. The separation of concerns is critical in any IT. But they work completely different. And they work different to the point that developers don't understand why it takes the ops guys so much time
sure,
to actually put that stuff in production. It's already done. The tests are green. The quality gates are passed. What the heck are you doing? And those are doing the work that requires a proper due diligence. I mean, they have to make sure because they only have one chance. It either works or it doesn't. They have to make sure that the stuff that gets pushed out has the absolute possible or maximum possible likelihood not to fail,
sure,
because any failure in production can cause a lot of trouble for any organization. Now, they try to solve it by kind of trying to marry those, at least from the perspective of the cycle. So when developers ship, DevOps push this in production, they kind of structure this in a way that a DevOps guy is always in this agile team whatsoever. The well, I'm not talking about pure renaming. This has happened too, but I'm talking about how it was actually supposed to be structured. Now we ended up with like 20 ops guys distributed over 20 teams and doing the same work 20 times.
sure.
And
Or
of
even,
course,
or which, sorry to interrupt you, or you would have something like you would have a developer whose job it was to be a DevOps engineer on top of their existing work too.
yeah,
Um,
that's rare. You know,
yeah,
when you can do magic and move mountains using your computer, the last thing you want to do is to go on call at 2 a.m. Let's be honest,
sure, yeah,
developers don't want to run systems unless they are really those who are like thinking holistically or carry the whole responsibility whatsoever. But it's rare. It's also mutual, actually. Developers, operations guys don't really like to write software. But this is a different problem. But they realize that, hey, if we do it 20 times, how about we do it once and provide this as a reusable thing?
yeah,
So that's where the thinking of a platform comes into play. That unfortunately has blown up to the point with all this. Yeah, now everybody talks again about cultures, about kind of a product thinking in this. I'm pretty puristic here. I'm saying that this is a pure next iteration to avoid doing the same thing 20 times. It's pretty complicated to do it once. The DevOps job is absolutely horrible. And I feel with everybody who does DevOps. So let's just reduce the number of things that you do to one instead of 20 and provide this as a reusable service. So you kind of your obligation becomes to provide abstractions, to give them access to stuff that they can easily find and everything. And now with spending your time in Cloud Code, all of these things just go away. That would be between you and actually finding the right thing to use, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, I want to talk about AI and how this kind of disrupts this space in a second. I want to just continue with software engineering for a bit because at least with DevOps, at least this was my initial thing. When DevOps became, I guess, more prevalent in the enterprise, right? Like, yeah, like there was this push 15 years ago, whatever you want to call it, how long ago it was, where it's like you can't ship software twice a year. Like the idea of shipping software twice a year, it's only going to do damage to your organization because your customers need things shipped. Like your customers need results faster, right? And like we decided all of a sudden that it's like, oh, this is a tools problem. And DevOps became about CI/CD and deployment, and then SRE came out of that. And it's like we're creating tools and methodologies to fix, in my opinion, which has been like what you were talking about a bit earlier, where it's like organizational complexities that need to be simplified. Like your example of like, okay, you have a guy that does, or a gal that does this, and then you have another guy or gal on a different team that does the same thing. It's like, why don't standardize it? So I get like my question for you, and this is kind of a spicy take. Do we even really care about the tools when it comes to DevOps and platform engineering, right? Like, do the tools even matter? Or is it really just how does the organization change to accommodate the use of tools to bring better value?
I can tell you my personal opinion, and our DNA in the company is exactly that. We don't think that this is a cultural change that is necessary. I think that the tooling is broken. The problem is that everything since the Unix is built around the idea of running the stuff on your machine. You are the guy, you sit in a room without any windows and you do all the work. That's
Sure.
basically how it all works. And this has not improved, well, almost at all since then. So every new generation of software that supports the operations way of work follows exactly the same principles. Now, this thinking in building blocks that you chain together to solutions, this is one way of thinking about the solution. Unfortunately, when you keep adding those building blocks, you end up having a lot of them. And
Yeah.
they are not consistent. They're written by different people that follow different APIs. They are sometimes insufficient. Sometimes it's one single guy somewhere in Ohio maintaining this open source thing, right, you know the joke, right?
Yeah.
And you end up with a what we used to call the Rube Goldberg machines. I realized that not many people know what it is anymore. So basically, when you watch any of the old cartoons, they used to build complicated machines just to do one simple thing.
Yes.
And that's what happens on the upside of things. There are people who like doing that, but the majority is just like they are in the situation that they have to do it. Now, um, why is this wrong? Because we need to start helping organizations and professions by implementing use cases. When you look on the developer side of things, it's all about already pre-implemented use cases. We have IDEs, now we have Cloud Code, all of these things, or your IDE would already, without any AI, generate tests for you. Those are concrete use cases that I have in the life cycle of that particular software development. But it doesn't happen like that on the upside of things. And use cases are different there, a little bit more complicated, but they end up just building them over and over again from this rudimentary low level building blocks.
Yeah.
And this is what we as a company are ourselves bringing to the table, but also imagining. We're trying to improve things radically by saying, hey, how about we put all this nasty, low level, repetitive things that are the same in every single gig. But since you cannot take them into your next gig, you end up
Yeah.
re-implementing the same thing again and again and again. How about we go one level further and say, how about we just re-implement them, implement them the way that can be reusable. So it's not like building blocks. It's not really this. It's use cases that are already pre-implemented, and you can use them to make your life simpler.
Yeah, you mentioned
Yeah.
something that I just kind of chuckled internally at. Like, I remember like working with like ops people or systems administrators back in the day, and they would always tell me about their flash drive or their USB stick, and I would say like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "Oh, like this is my USB stick with all of my scripts on it. It has my Bash scripts on there. If I'm in Windows, I have PowerShell scripts, and I carry this wherever I go. Like, if I leave a company, I go here because I know there are certain things that I need to do at every single job." Right. So like
Exactly.
that's what you're talking about, right? It's about taking the existing way we go about doing things and templating it, right?
Right.
So like the idea of, hey, I'm going to build an app, like I know like these are the primitives that are needed for this app. Or even more low level, like we're onboarding a new engineering organization or a new development team, like what are the things that development team needs to be successful, right? And these things, this is not like new information. It's just that we've now thought about like, do we really need to like reinvent the wheel every single time, or
Right.
does it make sense to kind of build a wheel that is like agnostic enough that anybody can go and take that, right? And
Exactly.
if you think about it, like on the open source side, like you see this a lot. You're seeing a lot of like standardization of tools, right? Like obviously we can talk about Kubernetes is like a standardization for microservice architecture. You can talk about open telemetry for standardization of how we collect telemetry and logs. Like, do you think that there eventually will be, and this is kind of leads into talking about what you folks are doing at Platform Engineering Labs, but like, do you think at some point there will be like a standardized template across everything to how we go about building software, building out development teams? Do you think that comes out at any point? I know that platform engineering is a concept, but I'm talking about like an actual implementation.
Yeah, I mean, not for everything for sure. I mean, I think that we need to take enough time to consider the use cases and situations everybody is in, and they're all the same. But I can give you an idea, since this is not really reusable, as you described, to just drag along all this baggage they accumulated throughout their careers, and didn't even think about reusability of that. When you're in this situation, you have a database that you can figure in your next gig like 99% the same like you did
Sure.
before,
Yeah.
and there's just a little difference. And this is the weird part nobody actually wants to publicly admit, except those who want to change it, is that when you go into the next gig, you will find 80% at least of stuff it's the same that you did before,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
unless you go from Microsoft to Linux, where you kind of need to completely relearn the whole foundation. Well, at least the commands and stuff. Unless you do something like that, it's always the same. Your Kafka is the same. Your database is the same. Your framework is the same. You find the same CI/CD solution configured somewhat different, et cetera, et cetera. It's always the same stuff. But for whatever reason, people even tend to complicate this for themselves.
Sure.
So that's also a nasty part that needs to change. And this is the only one that I'm seeing culturally or maybe educationally, is that engineers generally tend to kind of reinvent the wheel. I
Yeah.
mean, not invented here is a very common pattern, and it has existed for years and will still exist, right? Um, um, but the point is, um, there's so much work that can be done outside of this kind of reapplying the same thing over and over again,
Hmm.
that it needs to be educated. The pragmatism. I mean, I'm personally calling it pragmatism because I like seeing myself pragmatic as hell. Um, uh, so I would always try to automate everything in a way that I don't need to touch, and I want to
Yeah.
make it as dumb as possible, so I don't need to configure anything, and it's going to work right away. That this is always my idea. So when I
Sure.
had to do something twice, that's not going to happen for the third time. It's already automated. But again, now I really don't remember the question. Now I
No, you
went
answered.
really around.
No, you answered it. Like I think what I was trying to get to was and you hit the nail on the head. It's like we're continually in technology. We're creating solutions to problems that don't really exist. because we think that we have some special sauce that, like, I always joke that it's like 99% of the apps that are built, you have some database and you want to like make that database into a UI. Like
Yeah,
99% of the things that are ever created in the history of software is basically that. And then you have all this
right.
meta programming, which like tools or services or whatever to facilitate the ability to make forms over data more effective. Right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's that's my thought.
yeah,
Um, but I think going back to like the platform engineering thing, it's like, you know, the idea of like every developer wants to feel special, right?
yep,
Like we have the ID that we love. We like dark theme or light theme. We have things. We're a Mac person. We're a Linux person. We're a Windows person, right? We all want to be special, right? So from your perspective, like when you go about like trying to figure out ways to effectively talk to a lot of different customers, talking about like what your folks are doing at Platform Engineering Labs, like how do you go about like building messaging or building sort of rules of thought, knowing that every developer wants to be unique, but
yes.
standardization is required to succeed and be successful and survive?
Well, standardization has many faces, right? I mean, what we are targeting um, uh, uh, are folks, and this resonates very well across the board, is that our goal is to get rid of the toil that you don't want
Yeah,
anyway. I mean, some of it is enjoyable. I agree that you might be, learning a new tool and learning new tricks whatsoever might be really satisfying. And everybody who gains this knowledge suddenly says, "Oh yeah, and I mastered this thing now." I mean, this is all good, but there is toil that is due to the fact how tools work and don't want to cooperate with each other, and how simple and rudimentary they are, building all together collectively a very large surface to operate upon. This is nothing else but operational drag. I'm talking about the right side. I mean, you're talking about developers. Developers naturally have a lot of space for creativity. Even in the weirdest cubicle environment I've seen in my whole life, it's still people who can invent stuff to some extent and can enjoy it rolling. On the DevOps side of things, it's much more boring than that. It is actually a lot of responsibility. Nobody likes you. Everybody shows points with the finger at you,
sure.
and there is no chance you can break anything, right? So you basically have to check everything 20 times, and you naturally kind of tend to to verify everything 25 times, etc., etc. I've been throughout my career. I've seen when I was delivering software into air-gapped environments, and you give them scripts, they will never run them blindly. I mean, they will run your script line by line. Forget five, nothing works. But this is better than trusting anybody. Long story short, um, you spoke about this platform engineering aspect. I think that it is definitely possible without stupid work to feel special.
Mm,
It's about solving complicated problems. It's not about just tinkering something. And honestly, there are tools on the market that will let you do the same thing 20 times. And at the end of the day, when you really look at what you did, I don't want to bash anything. I mean, it's a really friendly conversation with whatsoever. We have our own value proposition, et cetera, et cetera. This is outside of this discussion. But what I want to say is that there are spaces and tools where you just, at the end of the day, you spend 8 hours debugging this thing and you don't even know what you did,
yeah,
right? I mean, you,
yeah,
you have no idea where the time went. And that's what we are rethinking on our end as platform engineering labs. We take the freedom to basically reinvent the technologies that are supposed to be solving small, reusable kind of workflows, if you wish, put them on autopilot and move on to the solution of a problem that really matters.
yeah,
And with all these advances in artificial intelligence, this will be even more important that humans feel themselves in the loop for important stuff and not for operational drag. Nobody wants your robot to come back to you and ask you for permission for stuff that you don't even understand.
sure.
Why are you asking me this thing? I don't know. I don't know. Right?
Yeah, I mean, first
W-
off, thanks for that. I think that there's a ton of just trying to demystify things, right? Like, and I, you mentioned AI, and I think the conversation kind of leads to this, right? I think that if you look at the current like software development lifecycle, that infinity sign that we've been seeing for the last however long, 30 years, that's broken now, right? Like that SDLC loop has changed substantially by the idea that generating code or the time it takes to generate code is almost zero now. And I'd love to kind of get your thoughts. It's like, how, obviously not every organization is going to go full agentic, right? Where, you have a handful of developers and their job is to basically just facilitate what these agents are doing. Like there's going to be a healthy mixture of people that write code and people that kick off agents and do all these things. So when we talk about like building platforms or figuring out effective ways to facilitate the ability for humans and agents to interact together and there not to be toil, like you talked about earlier. Like, what are some of
Yep.
the things that you think about?
I mean, like critical permissions and stuff, right? I mean, you want to build a foundation for your agents to come back to you when it matters, not when this thing has to resolve ambiguity you didn't even do. When your tools don't really allow them to make decisions on the spot, and there's a lot of stuff that you need to interpret, this makes any AI with its non-deterministic algorithms even less precise. So what we need to remove out of the equation is stuff that actually, and this is the same, this toil that I described, this kind of low level, low value doing that you keep yourself busy with. Right now, it's the same situation for AI agents. And by no means can you improve any of that by giving it more context whatsoever. You make them even more uncertain about everything. What is our response as the industry right now to that? Human in the loop. I
Yeah,
don't believe for a second that I mean, honestly, I don't want to be part of the industry that considers humans just stupid semi machines that have to respond to robotic questions that are absolutely meaningless, right? I don't want to be part of what of the cycle where I have to review code that is obviously wrong, but has been created with confidence. Um, um, so I think that we still have plenty of space to discover. But let me tell you this: I mean, I have a background in machine learning. I'm looking back at a career. I wrote books. I wrote the first European book about big data, for example, back then. So I kind of familiar-ish with this space too,
sure.
how it works. Did a lot of NLP in my life. And when you look at this, we still have a lot of work to do in order to figure out how far we go with the um with what we learned, what works best between the human and machine. For example, we are rolling a product called formae, which is our response to the needs of infrastructure as code nowadays. And we didn't decide to go with Markdown and natural language for the reason that any of those can be imprecise. And what we figured out in the past decades that the best contract between a human and machine actually is code. And
Sure.
they get more and more and more abstraction, but it's still code. This means that when this code is valid and is compiled in the best case, there's nothing that can go wrong anymore, except of maybe I don't know, like sun striking and all the bits turning around. But that's more or less something unpredictable. Long story short, here is that I think that so I was skeptic myself. I was like, oh my god, they're taking away this creative part of my job of what I learned. We discussed this in the beginning. I wanted to be artist and I wanted to feel as artist with my computers. But now I use AI a lot. We use this as a team a lot. We are automating some kind of a software factory for ourselves. But what we are giving away is tedious work.
Yeah.
Most of the code writing, I mean, I'm not talking about copy pasting from Stack Overflow. That was like we did this for the past 20 years in this
Yeah.
industry, and I don't consider this any creative or actually useful. But now we have that on steroids, right? You don't need to look this up. You don't need to Google stuff and whatsoever. You get like kind of a 80% ish thing, and then you can go and decide spot by spot without having to own the whole thing. Obviously, what the industry needs to understand, and that was my eye opener. I said, Throughout my career, 95% of the code I had to write, I didn't want to own anyway.
Sure.
Like I hate
Yeah.
writing tests. I mean, I admit that. I mean, who loves writing tests? Nobody, right? So I used my IDE to generate all these tests and whatsoever, right, with the proper coverage. So and this goes on. A lot of this code. I mean, I don't care personally about user interfaces. I like them when they're cute, but I don't want to code them. So all of that does not matter for me, and everybody will have to learn for themselves how much they really are emotional about and how much they can just give away. And that's what we get these robots for. And that's why I changed my mind from being genuinely skeptic to saying, oh my God, I can focus on the 5% that really matter. And everything else, I don't care.
Yeah, I was talking. I mean, first off, I appreciate all of that. I agree with everything. I think what really clicked for me, I was talking to somebody, this is probably a year ago now. They asked me something simple like, hey, like, do you have a good template to do this? Right? Hey, do you have like a GitHub repository or something that I can go and take a look at, like that I can basically take myself and I can just add stuff on top of it? And my response was, well, why don't you just have GitHub Copilot generate what you're looking for? And I just said it like kind of like haphazard, like as a joke. But then I recognized that is it. That's where I see the ultimate value prop of generative AI or agentic work, or what we want to say is like, help me get to where I want to actually start to contribute.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, like you're talking about, if I want to build like a Node.js app, like I got to do a whole bunch of stuff to like make it work. And then I got to get Axios. I got to do all this stuff, right? I got to add all these pieces together. I got to go all these NPM packages that I don't know any of this code. This person, who knows where this person is or if they even care about this repo anymore, right? Do all of that work for me. Wire everything up. So literally like generate me an app. I can hit run. It runs. Okay, now I can build on top of this, right?
Right.
Like the value unlock for me is huge. Like I've created apps that like I would never create because I didn't want to use our example earlier, get down into the toil of having to like build out the architecture for a solution, figuring out like, okay, do I want to use this pattern or this pattern or this thing or this thing? I can just generate it and then like, okay, well, these are the things that I want to do on top of it. Right. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, I mean, like I've built things that I would literally have never that I've had ideas for building for like years, but I never I don't
Right.
have the time for that. Now I have the
Right.
time for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then go to the next level. By no means am I a big proponent of vibe coding, but the idea of giving people who understand the domain the ability to quickly prototype
Sure.
while putting them inside of a sandbox that doesn't do bad things whatsoever is actually all not that bad because everybody hates consuming what your PM is telling you into a prototype. Nobody enjoys that work anyway, right? I mean, you told us about this architecture stuff and everything. Actually, I enjoy doing that to
Yeah,
some extent.
I meant for like a salute, like built, like actually writing the code, do the wiring up. Like the
Yeah,
architecting, I think is
exactly.
still a human tendency, right? That's a human required thing. But like
Right.
oh, I'm going to create this project and this project, and they're going to reference each other, and all
Right,
the
and
glue.
that's exactly the
Yeah,
thing. I don't care. I don't care how it looks like on disk. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care what the structure of the repository is. Only somebody who's really into structuring developer work and putting this into a proper context and into proper workflow cares about how this stuff lands on the disk. I don't want all these fights between developers. Oh, yeah, we should have used the monorepo. No, we should have used
yeah,
20 repos and everything. All this stuff doesn't matter. At some point, actually, this is just waste. What matters is that the software that can earn this organization money or reputation or whatever the organization is after gets into production without any interruption and any stupid stuff in between. That is the only thing that matters. Everything else are just flavors.
yeah. I can't argue with that. I think, my only caveat is that do we get to a point where even the tools don't matter? I've been thinking about this for a while. It's like, or do we care about what programming language do we use? Do we care about what frameworks do we use? Do we care about any of this stuff, right? Because at the end of the day, if our job is to provide input and verify output and make subtle changes if necessary, do we really care about any of it? And then the hemming and hawing about tabs versus spaces, or the repository pattern versus this pattern versus okay, like, do we care? Do we really care?
Well, it's funny, but I think that we need to decompose this a little bit. I mean, we're very close to the end, but and we can go for hours. Now, my perception here is authoring code is a solved problem now. We have to agree that, well, you can make a choice. Like sometimes I will start my Claude session and will say, oh yeah, I want that to be written in Python because I like that stuff. I know that the best numeric support is there, et cetera, et cetera. I can reuse all of that stuff. But this is like, I mean, at the end of the day, I stopped caring. I did so many programming languages in my day. They're all the same. Sorry to say that, but the point you mentioned tools. Now, what is extremely important now is that we are able to use tools that don't require us to do work. So that maybe we don't perceive them as tools anymore. We can call them agents whatsoever. Like for example, in what we're building, there's also an agent in there. It's not a LLM based agent. It is a classic agent. I mean, the goal of a software agent is to do work on your behalf without you having to do that work. So that's how this thing is defined. And we are all agentic by ourselves without using AI in most of the context. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that this is also a tool. You don't need to interpret the tool as something you will explicitly call and then chain its output with something else whatsoever. That stuff needs to go away. We need to be more building systems that are on autopilot, something that can be easily reached with very simple interface, told what needs to be done, and then produce that result eventually. So asynchronous kind of systems start making more and more sense, right? So you don't babysit anything that you're doing. You can completely offload it into the machines. And those are still tools. It just I think it's a matter of definition. What is a tool? My point is that we need to be computing things that were pioneered long before, but never actually made it into the mainstream. Everything that is asynchronous, everything that is robust, everything that is resilient, your AI agents will not be able to solve any of that if they don't have the proper support from the systems underneath. Repeating the work that didn't catch up, etc., etc. We should not be reinventing those wheels. We should be reusing what we have.
I don't disagree. I think that, I mean, I am very much in the camp that we need a very standardized approach to how we interface with AI. Like, and I think right now we're in this kind of this race of like which AI companies are going to win, which AI companies are going to get acquired, right? Like in all of that, like, and I think in some months or some years time, like we'll have like a definitive, like this is the way that we go about building these systems, right? um and you mentioned like we're almost out of time, so like I really want to just pause and say like I really appreciate this conversation. I love talking about not just kind of your history and how you've gone about solving problems your entire career, but how you're thinking about solving problems in the future. For folks that maybe you haven't taken a look at platform engineering labs, or you're not following Pavlo, like I highly recommend doing so. There'll be some links in the show notes to the platform engineering labs website, as well as some other places that you can find Pavlo and see, follow around with what he's talking about. Before we sign off, my friend, do you have any parting words?
Oh, I mean, I can make the decision on the spot if I really want to sound visionary. No, I don't. I think that it is a special time to be an engineer right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should be rather enjoying it instead of trying to resist it. Honestly, what is happening right now is going to happen. I mean, when we get past all this hype and everything, there's plenty of stuff going to be left over that makes sense and we like. Will we use Claude or instead something local, I don't care. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's here to stay. And after myself resisting this little, I'm actually considering a great new toy. Suddenly I have a system that is, well, I can trick it, I can cheat it, I can push it to the limits. I feel like I'm in the driver's seat, and sometimes I'm angry because this thing cannot produce the result, even if I try to tell it what to do, whatever. But it's a new tool that allows us to eliminate, well, unfortunately, stuff that is a little bit creative, but we never wanted, at least the people I know, we never wanted to do anyway,
Sure.
even if they are creative, right? So writing letters, I hate doing that. Sometimes I have to do it. It's a creative work. Yes, you need to invent the text and stuff. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's I just don't like writing itself. So anyway, I think that the industry just needs to absorb what's happening now and go figure out the best ways. But I'm very unhappy with what is happening with wheel reinvention. Like every single framework that comes up,
Yeah.
it completely ignores what we actually achieved in the past decades. That is dangerous. I think we need a good mix of what we know already and where we want to head. So I think that engineers with head and with experience actually will shape this next few years, and we will be at the point where we reuse as much as we can take over into this new world while using this new toy.
I I love that. I mean, I love the thought of it's just another tool in your tool belt. Use the phrase toy. I can't agree more. I think that, you know, you said, I think you said this a bit earlier, like there's not never been a better time to be an engineer, because right now we have limitless opportunity and decreased toil,
Mhm.
which I think is a
Right,
great thing. And
right.
and Pavlo, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and having a chat with me. It's been great to get to know you a bit more and hear your thoughts about where we're going in this space, because and I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate the folks who are watching this live, as well as the folks listening in the future. My name is Isaac Levin. This has been Coffee and Open Source. And if you like this episode, be sure to share it with some people. Maybe they'll get something out of it. And I hope you enjoy a great day. And I hope you have a just a lovely life. And for my friend Pavlo, take care.